Hey everybody, this is Jim McDonald, engineer, producer, and co-host of Mark Bell's PowerCast. I've had to be away from the guys, away from California for a couple of weeks due to a family medical emergency that I can't really talk about. However, we have burned through all the original episodes of the show that we had in the can. So this week we're going to invite you to take another listen to our first episode with Dr. Layne Norton from early in the PowerCast. This is still the most popular episode of the PowerCast ever. So we want you to enjoy this one, take a listen, and hopefully we'll be back on track next week. Also, if you've been listening for a while, you'll know that I am a big fan of the NPGL, the Professional Grid League. Check out npgl.com for the upcoming season openers, and I will be at the Haas Pavilion on August 28th in Berkeley at 7 p.m. for the first match of the San Francisco Fire, featuring my buddies Chad Augustine and Drew Conavero, and also the fabulous Sam Dancer and many, many others, versus the Philly Founders. So anyway, check it out, npgl.com.
Bell's PowerCast, sponsored by thepowermagazine.com, howmuchyourbench.net, and BSN, makers of NO Explode. Look for BSN products at bodybuilding.com. Alongside Silent Mike and Jim McD, here's your host, Mark Bell.
An arrogant wanker?
You know what wanking is, right?
Wanksta?
Wank. No. Like wank, 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 wank.
Yeah, wanking it.
Yeah. But we don't say that.
Wanking on it. I know what she's talking about.
Fapping.
I think that's purely...
So is he going to call at 11?
Either that or we can call him. He is live.
You arrogant wanker.
On
his face is his face going to be on there?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I mean, not that I care. Well, I kind of care.
You do care.
We'll take a picture right away, Mark. I'll get your CrossFit hat with him. That'll be funny.
Ask if he'll do a podcast interview with Kiefer.
Yeah, that's so terrible, right?
Well, do they not like each other?
Well, I just think they're from totally opposite camps. I don't know if they don't have anything personal. Layne might not even know who he is.
Kiefer from camp.
In post, I'll have to figure out whether we're actually going to keep that on the podcast.
Oh, I didn't know you were recording it.
Oh, yeah. I'll just bleep it. That'll be even better. So we're live, and I'm ready whenever you guys are.
And we're live!
So we'll just hit him up right now.
Welcome to the podcast, everyone.
That's Silent Mike with the homosexual voice.
It's Mike on the mic. Yeah.
We're going to call Dr. Layne Norton. We need a doctor on this show.
Is there a doctor in the house?
My blood pressure's too high.
Doctor, give me the news.
It's Layne Norton.
Hello.
Hey there, Layne Norton.
How's it going, man?
Pretty good. Hey, let me, hold on. Where's my... Oh, crud. Give me 2 seconds. I need to go get my headset real quick.
Sure.
Is that okay if I wear a headset during this?
Yeah, whatever you want, man.
Okay, cool.
I got to say, we're able to see an image of Layne Norton here, and yeah, I mean, first of all, what does he live in, a castle? I mean, it looks fantastic, and then secondly,
he's jacked and tan.
He looked handsome.
No, do you see that picture in the background? I think that's him. There's a glare, but he's jacked and tan in that picture.
He's got his shirt off, and he's flexing in the background.
Oh, my gosh.
But in the front round, he's got his shirt off as well, which I wasn't expecting.
Double take. Maybe we should take our shirts off.
Did he go to take a dump?
Again.
I think his flexible diet's ending up in the flexible toilet. Got that special parachute pants on or something.
Oh, look at that. He's got a microphone set up.
He's flexing his tricep.
He's got a microphone set up? I didn't notice that.
He's flexing his triceps. Oh, my God.
You guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine. We can see you, but you're going to have a difficult time seeing us. We're in a dark room.
We're in a little closet.
Because we have to podcast in a dark room for whatever reason, and then the camera's tilted toward pretty much the sky. So
Nothing wrong with that.
So we'll wave. Lean in and wave, everybody. There's Silent Mike.
Anyway, Doctor, let's get down to business here. First of all, why did you decide to Skype us with your shirt off? Are you trying to show us how jacked you are? Are you trying to be intimidating? What's going on here?
Well, everybody is stronger than me, so I figure, at least maybe I look better.
There you go.
I'll come in tanner than everybody else.
So I had a guy on the Twitters. I posted up some stuff and said, without being a prick, what kind of questions would you like answered? And from the doctor here, and the guy said basically that he's out if he can't be a prick because he thinks you're such a wanker, which I didn't really think was too nice.
Get in line, buddy.
Yeah. Seriously, take a number, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you're known for doing bodybuilding the natural route, and I've watched some of your videos and stuff and seen you've obtained a tremendous amount of strength as well. I believe deadlifting around 700 pounds, perhaps squatting around the same weight. I'm not really sure where the bench press is at, but you're under some fire, under some scrutiny here and there because people are kind of just doubting. They're like, man, I don't think that guy could be natural. He's pretty goddamn jacked, and he's lifting some heavy shit. So, give us some background and some ideas on some of your progression, because I think in the progression is going to be where people will see the hard work instead of just thinking that you're cutting corners and taking steroids.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first off, I've discussed this with you before, Mark. I don't have any problem with anybody that chooses to go that route. It's a personal choice, just something I've never chosen to do. And as long as you compete in untested meets, no problem, with me, I would always tell people, that's exactly what I say, is look at the progression. Show me where I jumped up 200 pounds in a year, right. You know what I mean, in terms of my lift, and show me where I put on 10 pounds of stage weight in a year. It never happened. When I won my pro card in natural bodybuilding, I took 4 years off because I was doing my PhD. And in that time, I added 3 pounds of stage weight. Yeah. Wow. Just screams steroids. You know what I mean? So, if I'm on stuff, I must be getting some bad shit, I'll tell you what.
Yeah. Let me know what you think of this theory. This is something I said a long time ago, and obviously this could be skewed a little bit by height, but I basically just said if someone's above around 210 pounds and they're less than 10% body fat, I've always just felt that person, not to say that they're definitely without a doubt on steroids, but you just typically don't see that. You don't normally see someone weighing 220, being 5'10", and being 8% body fat. So would you kind of say that when people start to reach certain levels, you can start to kind of piece together certain accusations, or you'd say you would just kind of take their perception of it or take their word for it on what they're saying?
Well, I think what's difficult is, there's always, if you look at a Gaussian distribution, which is kind of like a distribution of populations, you always have 70% of the population falls within kind of the norm, right? And then you have, if we're looking at, let's just say genetics for bodybuilding, 70% of people are going to fall within a norm range, right? And then you're going to get people on either end of that curve, like some people with kind of poor genetics and some people come with really good genetics. And then you're going to get 2.5, or 2.5, 1 to 2% are going to be, a standard deviation, right? Where one's going to be really bad, where we've all known people who work really hard and just have trouble putting on muscle and strength, even though they do the right things. And then you're going to have, on the other end, you're going to have the genetic elite. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I mean, absolutely. Most people are not going to be 220 pounds, 5'10", 8% body fat. Absolutely not. But that said, when you start getting to the upper echelons of lifting and bodybuilding, you're dealing with the genetically elite in a lot of cases. And so, I mean, you probably known people who didn't even really work that hard, who would walk in a gym and bench press 400 pounds and they were natural. You know what I mean? You probably known somebody like that. My guess is you've been around so many people training. Now, are they typical? No. But does that make it impossible? Absolutely not. I mean, I think when a lot of people get in trouble is they try to kind of put like I think there's this idea that there's like this black and white, right, between natural and not natural. And nobody who's natural could be better than somebody that's on steroids. And that's not the case, because I'm sure you know people who are on steroids who look like crap, who aren't that strong. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you know people who are natural who are stronger than them. So there's a gray area where there's overlap. You know what I mean? Now, if you're talking about, the best people in any sport are kind of three things: genetically elite, they work very, very hard, and they tend to be on drugs. So, like, for example, if you want to take, somebody is saying, well, Layne Norton has to be on drugs. Well, if you really want to go to the other end of that, if you look at the Russian guy, what's his name, Belayev, I mean, he's like 208, and I think he totaled like over 2,000 pounds.
Yeah, he's a beast.
Raw. Like, okay, so there's like a 300 something pound gap there. You know what I mean? So, if you start dealing with genetically elite, you can, and I wouldn't even consider myself genetically elite. I'm not going to be. I'll be the first person to say I don't think I'm the strongest guy out there at 220, even drug free. So, I think that's something you have to consider. I mean, there's other guys like Dan Green. Dan is an absolute freaking monster. You know what I mean? I think he's totaled over 1,900 pounds at 220. So I think, you can draw certain conclusions, and then I've heard people say, well, he can't be natural because Frank Zane was 185 pounds on stage and he's 190 something. Okay, well, Frank also had a 28-inch waist. My waist at contest is like 32 inches, all right? So I have a bigger structure than him straight off. And I don't think anybody, I wouldn't even, there's no way I would argue that I look better than Frank Zane. You know what I mean? Right. And so, again, structure plays into it, all those kinds of things. So I've known some of the people who win the best natural bodybuilders in the world are like 170 pounds, 5'8", 5'9", and they just have such great muscle bellies and structure that they look better. Now if you looked at them, you would say, man, they got to be 220 pounds, but it's because of the way their muscle bellies flow. I mean, if you look at a guy like, let's go the other end. Let's look at Phil Heath. When he was winning shows at like 215, 220 pounds, he still looked more muscular than guys that were 30, 40 pounds heavier than him just because of the way his structure is. So I think you can put generalizations on things, but I think the problem is that people will take that generalization and they'll say black and white, no, you can't do any more than this, right? And when you're dealing with people in the upper echelons of strength and bodybuilding, you're dealing with genetically elites and you're dealing with outliers. So, people are entitled to their opinion, but it's difficult to watch when they kind of try to piece together facts, or quote unquote facts, from some of this information.
It gets to be really difficult to kind of sift through the BS when you got, a guy like Mike O'Hearn who's like 240, 250. He's just so damn big and so damn jacked. It's hard to believe, anything other than he uses steroids. So sometimes it gets to be real difficult when you have the people out there who are kind of, competing in a natural show, winning a natural show, and then you're like, well, shit, man, that guy's like 250, 260 pounds. How's he, obtaining that? Maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but it just makes it very difficult. The other thing to remember is
Mike is pretty tall, too.
Yeah, he's 6'2", 6'3", yeah.
Yeah, so he's up there.
In general.
But,
strong as shit.
And, I mean, if you inject me with truth serum and make me tell the truth, would I have skepticisms? Yeah, absolutely, But at the same time, I'm not going to come out and I don't accuse people just because I know that the human body is capable of amazing things. I mean, we have people walking around who are, 7.5 feet tall just from their genetics, right? So are they not natty? You know what I mean? Like, so it's
Mike O'Hearn is also up at like 4 a.m. every morning doing cardio. So he's working his ass off regardless of whether he's on them or not.
And I think I think one of the other things too is we've got kind of a generation of people, and I see this in business as well. It's kind of like the age of entitlement generation, right? So most of these guys who I see accusing others of being on steroids, they either look terrible, or they've been on steroids and they still don't look very good, and so they're kind of. Me?
I'm sitting right here, man. That was rude. On my own show too.
And I come into places and I knock people out. That's how I roll. I just come up.
There you go.
I come up in your house and I tell you how it's going to be.
I like that.
But that there's that, or there's like a lot of them is like young kids, right? So they're like 17, 18, 19, and so they lift for 6 months and they're like, oh well, I'm not as strong as Layne. He can't be natty. It's like, dude, I've been doing this for 15 years. Not missing a freaking day of workouts. So. I tell you what, go work your ass off at something for 15 years, and if you still suck at it, well, then we can have a conversation. You know what I mean?
Then go play chess
my guess
or something.
is if you work at it for a long time, you're probably not going to suck at it. Right. It's just, I think we have this kind of, everything's so fast now, right? Like if we want an answer, we can go to the internet and get it in seconds. Right. Food is ready in seconds. Like all this sort of stuff. And so the idea that you might have to do something for over a decade to really become great at it. People don't want to hear that shit. You know what I mean?
Well, there's perception that's involved. Is all these haters are just going by internet pictures. Someone can look huge in a picture if they're all by themselves.
Oh, sure.
They could be 160 pounds and they'll look like they're 250 and they're only 5 foot tall.
I got criticism. I had people saying, well, you can't be natural because you grow into a show. I'm like, what? I lost 35 pounds for my last show. I lost an inch off my arms almost, and I lost like an inch and a half off my legs. My squat went down by like 150 pounds.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So if you mean by that I grew into shows, then yeah, I guess I grew into a show. You know what I mean? But
I don't want to grow anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, you look. When you get leaner, you look more muscular. The best way to look like you gain 10 pounds of muscle is to drop 10 pounds of fat.
Right.
It's every time. It happens every time I diet down. My clothes will be fitting looser, all that sort of stuff. But when I'm in the gym, people go, man, you've gained some mass. I'm like, no, I'm like 15 pounds lighter right now,
Let's talk about that for a second. Do you think that's important to kind of pack on some size regardless of what kind of size it is? Do you feel that that's important? And if you do feel that's important, why is that important to be able to diet down and look more ripped after getting bigger?
Well, I think it all depends on kind of where you are in your progression of your physique, your lifting career, and what body fat is reasonable for you to maintain. So I'll take it kind of from a body fat set point. If you're somebody, everybody kind of has a range of body fat their body likes to be at. And let's say that range for somebody is 10, 11%, 10, 11, 12%. If you start getting really far below that, it becomes difficult to add muscle mass because your body senses that, and it's going to kind of put in motion metabolic processes that are going to, reduce the rate of muscle protein synthesis, increase the rate of breakdown, reduce the amount of deposition of amino acids you're going to get in lean tissue, because it senses that, you are kind of in a deficit, regardless of how many calories you're taking in. I'm generalizing a bit, but this tends to be true. Whereas if you get, near your set point or even slightly above that, your body says, okay, I'm fed. We can start putting, because muscle mass is expensive tissue. It's energetically expensive. You really have to do a hard time convincing your body to build it and then maintain it because it is energetically expensive. It costs a lot for the body. And it's kind of a liability in certain ways in that, if you go into starvation, if you're talking about from a teleological perspective, if you go into starvation, you've got all this energetically expensive tissue to maintain. Fat mass is much more kind of economical in terms of a survivability sort of perspective. And so that's why, if you're putting on weight fast, your body tends to put more towards body fat away from muscle.
So if you're really fat, you can just say you're trying to be economical about it?
Yeah. Exactly. I'm just trying to, I'm trying to improve my economy.
Yeah.
So, yes, you're going to have to gain some body fat, typically, And what people need to keep in mind is even if you gain some body fat, that doesn't necessarily mean your body fat percentage is going to go up. So what I mean by that is if you're 10% body fat and you gain 5 pounds, but it's in the same proportion, 10% of it is fat and 90% of it's lean tissue, your body fat will stay the same. Now, you may have to gain some body fat percentage too in order to gain some muscle mass, but it's a trade-off, right? So you have to keep in mind that, okay, a lot of people will say, well, I don't care about, if I gain body fat, I'm just looking to put on as much muscle tissue as I can. And so if I gain 50 pounds, even if only 5 of it's muscle, I don't care. Well, that's fine, but one of the things you have to realize is that if you ever want to take that fat off, now you've kind of exposed yourself to the liability of having to diet more aggressively and longer to get it off, and you're more likely to lose some of that muscle mass as you diet down. So I tend to be kind of in the middle. I'm not one of these people that says, well, you can't put on an ounce of fat when you're in a gaining phase. But I'm also not one of these people who says, well, you got to add, just don't worry about how much fat you add, just eat as much as you can. I think there needs to be a balance between the two of those.
In that vein, we've seen a lot lately of powerlifters who, due to injuries or whatever, decide to shift toward bodybuilding and actually compete. And I don't know if you have noticed that, but we've actually had quite a few friends who've done that lately. And it seems to me like they lose a lot going into that first show. They look kind of small going to the first show. And then after that, they sort of seem to find a balance between muscle and fat, and they look better the second and third time around.
Yeah, that can happen. I mean, I think part of it, too, is coming from a powerlifting background, and this is just my opinion and kind of like what I would guess. There's a lot of bad coaching for bodybuilding out there, like I'm sure there's a lot of bad coaching for powerlifting as well, but essentially what kind of the typical coaching is eat a shitload in the off season and then starve yourself to get ready for a show, and do hours of cardio. And there is a linear interference between muscle mass, strength, and the amount of cardio you do. That's been my friend Dr. Wilson showed that in some of his research. And further, the more aggressive you have to be with your diet, and the longer you go, the more muscle mass you're going to sacrifice. So, I think part of that is especially for powerlifting, you're used to what? You get as big and heavy as you can, then you cut down to make a weight class the last 3-4 weeks, and you really go restrictive, so that, during most of your training cycle, you're in a surplus and gaining strength, and in those last 3-4 weeks, you get really restrictive so that you can drop some weight, make the next weight class down. And so I think kind of that mentality might carry over into bodybuilding, where you're really, really, really cutting calories hard. You're trying to drop a lot of body fat in a really short period of time. And so you end up over dieting, you lose some muscle mass. I diet for a long period of time, but I do it very slowly. I diet for 20, 24 weeks, but I'm only losing, maybe 1% of my body weight per week at the absolute max. So whereas I see some people trying to drop, 40, 50 pounds in 12 weeks, and if you're going to do that, you're going to have to be extremely aggressive. And so you are going to lose some strength, you are going to lose a significant amount of muscle mass. So I think that may explain some of the reasons you're seeing that sort of phenomenon. And then as they kind of gain it back, maybe they learn how to do things better subsequently, and they're able to maintain more muscle mass.
Mm-hmm. One thing I hate is when people are talking about diet, is they're not upfront and honest about it. And I did an interview for my own magazine, Power Magazine. And, without talking too much about steroids and stuff like that, I did mention, T3 and a couple other things, because I think it's important for people to realize this is exactly how I did this. And I'm not saying that you have to do it that way. I'm just saying that's the way that I went about losing about 80 pounds. So do you feel that the drugs, in powerlifting, there's certain reasons why coaches are bad, and there's certain things that they learn that don't carry over to your regular person? Because powerlifters, let's face it, a lot of times they're fat, they have a huge stomach, and so they're going to lift a different way. When they talk about pushing their stomach out against the belt, and they talk about doing some of these different techniques and moves and so on, benching off your stomach comes to mind. Your average person doesn't have the stomach to bench press off of. So do you feel that sometimes the drugs are masking masking, giving the correct information to some of these people that are perhaps not using drugs?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it can be a problem. And, one of the things we've dealt with over the years in terms of my coaching and the articles I write is, people will say, well, you say that this is a suboptimal way to do this, but look, Mr. Olympia this year did that. I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to, just say, well, it's the drugs, because obviously all these guys still work hard. That's not in question. But you can mask some of, training inefficiencies, some diet inefficiencies. Certainly if you're on, a massive amount of drugs, becomes hard to do that if you're not on drugs. Masking, if you're suboptimal training, suboptimal nutrition, you're going to see a lot of deficiencies a lot faster. And the other thing is when you're talking about guys in the upper echelon, if you're dealing with genetically elite guys who are on drugs, now you kind of got a double whammy of what's masking maybe training inefficiencies. And I'll always say when people, ask me, well, what about this guy and what about that guy? It's like, look, you can always find exceptions, okay? And a lot of people get results in spite of what they do, not because what they're doing is optimal, all right? Everybody knows the dude who trains something, who bench presses once a week, eats at McDonald's, and like I said, bench presses 400 pounds or more. If I trained like that, am I going to bench press 400 pounds? Absolutely not. My best bench press ever is 395 in the gym. Okay, so should I be? And I train, bench press 2-3 times a week. I get my nutrition.
That's terrible, Layne, by the way.
You should go get an Egg McMuffin.
Yeah, maybe if I just had McDonald's more often, I'd be able to hit that 400 pounds.
Son of a bitch! You need a slingshot or something.
Shameless plug, right, bro?
There
Nothing too ashamed. No, and so yeah. I mean, it's. I think people have to be honest with kind of the information they're reading as well. Like, some of the. I remember there was a time frame where I was kind of in undergraduate school, and I kind of got exposed to what was actually going on in bodybuilding in terms of the amount of drugs and that sort of thing. And every article I'd read, I'd get like mad because I'm like, it's talking about, oh, I put on all this muscle and it's because of this new training technique I'm doing or this new, weird dietary thing. And in reality, you're thinking, nah, dude, you upped your dose. You know what I mean?
Right.
But, so you have to take it in balance. And I got in a kind of a Twitter beef a while back with, I don't want to say beef. We got in a disagreement with Dorian Yates in terms of talking about overtraining. And a lot of people blew it out of proportion. It was basically him and I just having a disagreement.
Dorian Yates, are you crazy?
Well, and he said, well, let my 6 Mr. Olympias talk. And that was his kind of – and it's like, I'm not saying – what I said was I'm not saying your data point is invalid. I'm just saying it's just one data point out of a consensus of that tens and thousands of the research that's out there, of the anecdotal research that's out there. So, that's basically what I said. And, you could also find exceptions to the other way because people would look at Ronnie Coleman, who's quite possibly – I mean, if Ronnie wanted to do powerlifting, he would have won all the powerlifting titles too.
Oh, I mean, that's
just – that dude is a freak. You know what I mean? But I mean, he would do what a lot of people consider high volume overtraining type stuff, and he won 8 Mr. Olympias. So it's, trying to sift through who is the, looking at the genetically elite who, are on drugs, that sort of thing, and even the genetically elite who aren't on drugs, and just looking at their training protocols and saying, well, that must be the best way to train. No, I don't think that's correct. I think you look at the large number of people who are doing very well and how they train and what the consensus is on the way they train and form some opinion from that as well as what actually has been shown in real research. I always tell people, look, I don't think people ask me what's more important, experience or science or research. And I'll say, look, they're both important. They both serve unique functions. And I will never say that, you should have one, not the other. I think both are important.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, in that vein, a lot of what we see in nutritional research is pretty small studies and case studies and small groups and things like that, and a lot of assumptions that seem like get based off of that. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's really hard to do large nutritional interventions, and I can speak to you as somebody who chose to do exclusively animal research in my data for the simple fact that I could get greater numbers of subjects, and they would do what I told them to do.
Right.
Compliance on nutrition studies is ridiculously low. It's extremely hard. Think about,
That makes sense, yeah.
I mean, people don't even like to, people pay me, a couple $1,000s to do a diet for them and then won't do it, right? So it's like,
Yes.
if you don't have that kind of motivation, not so much anymore, but back in the day, I would get more of that kind of client. And so, a lot of times, here's what happens if you're going to do a large nutritional study in humans that's, with a lot of subjects, you're talking about millions of dollars, even if your analysis isn't that spectacular, because you have to pay them. You have to pay them to do what you want them to do, especially if you're going to try and make it controlled in like a clinical setting and you want them to be doing a very regimented thing. People aren't going to blow up their lifestyle just because you want to do some research, and that's why when people, I got some attacks on my research. Well, you only did it in animals. It's like, well, first off, the model I used had been validated several times as being consistent from animal to human. And secondly, other labs like Dr. Stuart Phillips' lab and McMaster validated our research afterwards in humans. So, but the reason we did it was because we were looking at stuff that nobody else was really even talking about. So we wanted to make sure the mechanisms were correct first. So that's why we did it, because we wanted something we could tightly control and just make sure we were right about the mechanisms. And then we could worry about how clinical it was.
And animals never pick up Reese's peanut butter cups at the gas station.
Yeah, exactly. Animals don't do that. They also don't, bitch to you about, well, I had a really hard week, so I just didn't feel like following the diet. It's like, oh, okay, that's great.
Right.
It's my PhD research or anything. That was one of the things that weighed into it. And the other thing is you can have a larger number of subjects when you do that sort of thing. So no, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's a deficiency in terms of the research and the numbers and that sort of thing. And it does make it very hard to interpret research. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that there's not a great solution to it, and we just got to keep kind of grinding away. And we're going to get answers to things, but it's going to be in very small chunks or very small bits. You know what I mean? We're not going to get one study that kind of addresses, what the key for optimal body composition is. It's going to be over the course of hundreds of studies.
Speaking of studies, you're a firm believer in leucine, I believe also in branched-chain amino acids in general. And Mike and I talk about this kind of stuff quite a bit, as all of us do here at Super Training. We're always trying to figure out, what's optimal and what's even worth it and how much of a change it really makes. So can you elaborate on, leucine and kind of what you the protocol that you prescribe to most and what you feel it's able to do?
Sure, yeah. I mean, if you're talking about free-form leucine, obviously, like leucine content of protein sources is extremely important. That's what my PhD research was on, showing basically that the quality of protein in terms of anabolism was directly related to the leucine content of protein. Now, I also recommend for people who are are kind of in that upper echelon of wanting to absolutely optimize every little thing to supplement with branched-chain amino acids. And that's because, and it's very hard for me to kind of explain this without a wipe-off board, but basically there's what's called a refractory phenomenon after a meal, where you kind of get a suppression of muscle protein synthesis about a certain period of time after a meal, even though you still have elevations in amino acid levels. Kind of a good demonstration of this was Dr. Wolf he was at Texas at the time, but now in Arkansas. Probably heard a lot of people say, "Well, I just wish I could hook an amino acid drip up and just drip amino acids in all day." I'm sure you've probably heard that at some point.
We've tried that.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that for years.
Yeah. So, and actually what he found was he did that for 6 hours. Literally did that for 6 hours, but found that the anabolic response only lasted 2 hours, went back to normal, and then never got restimulated. And so what you actually have is when you have a constant elevation. It looks like when you have a constant elevation of amino acids, that you kind of invoke. That's an improper word, but you kind of cause this refractory response. And so we postulated that maybe by providing kind of a large dosage of a free-form amino acid and causing that kind of steady state to become a non-steady state where you spike those levels, that you would get a response. And we tried that in an experiment, and that's what we found, was that we basically, by supplementing with branched chains in between meals, you could kind of overcome that refractory response and optimize your muscle protein synthesis response. Now, the question is, how much does that, can I quantify that in terms of how much muscle is that going to help you with over the course of your lifetime? And the answer is I can't quantify that. My initial impressions are that, we're talking about the last, 2-3% maybe. You know what I mean? So people will ask me, well, are branched chains worth it? Well, I mean, it just depends, right? If you're somebody who's just kind of like a weekend warrior in the gym, or you're just looking to get a little bigger, a little stronger, would I say stop paying your health insurance so you can afford branched chain amino acids? No, I wouldn't say that. You know what I mean? And I would never say, start taking this, you're going to add 10 pounds of muscle. That's absolutely not. But do I think that perhaps there's a beneficial effect? Yeah, I do think that there might be a beneficial effect. But do we have direct research supporting that? No, we only kind of have bits and pieces that support that. So this is just my opinion of my interpretation of the available data that's out there, and I'll tell people that they can kind of, take that or leave that. And people will say, well, he consults for a supplement company that sells branched chain amino acids, and that is true. But
Skivation, right?
Yes, Skivation, but I have been pretty consistent on my thoughts on BCAAs for a while now. And if I did a study and it came out that it didn't do jack, I'd have to revisit my position. And you can see where I've revisited my position over the years on various things. I was a big proponent of glutamine back when I was an undergraduate, and then I got into graduate school, started looking at the research more in depth, and said, yeah, I'm not so much of a proponent of it anymore. And then I kind of went overzealous and said, that it has no benefit whatsoever. And then I've kind of come back a little bit more towards the middle on it recently, because I think there might be some benefits for it in terms of gut health. So, it's always you say you're a big believer. Well, I always try to tell people I try not to have beliefs, right? Because if you have beliefs, you'll argue a belief in the face of data. I try to have hypothesis that I support with evidence, and then if I'm making an opinion, I try to be honest about that opinion and tell people when it's just an opinion. So, in my opinion of the available data that I've pieced together, I think that branched chains can, if you take them, supplement with maybe like 4 or 5 grams of branched chains in between meals, that it might have a beneficial effect. But am I going to go out and say, take it because you'll add 10 pounds of muscle and 50 pounds in your bench press? No.
Sometimes cost is a limiting factor for some people. So could people, perhaps take a hydrolyzed whey protein or, some type of whey protein to kind of mimic what you're talking about, or does it have to specifically be a branched chain product?
That's a good question. Because and the answer is I don't know.
I mean, just in your opinion, what would you think?
Hydrolyzed maybe, because it's so quickly absorbed. I don't know about whey, regular whey, just because. Actually, what's funny is people think whey is a fast protein. We've always heard that whey is a fast protein because people always compare casein and whey. The fact of the matter is, whey is not really a fast protein. It's pretty normal, pretty similar to most other protein sources. It's just that casein is actually a real oddball. Casein is the one that's like really slow.
Growth hormone is pretty fast, right?
What's that?
Growth hormone? Is that pretty fast?
You trolled me.
Just messing with you.
Yeah, you trolled me. I didn't even realize I was getting trolled. You caught me off guard because you had me deep into the science.
Yeah, see? Hey, do you take anabolic steroids? Yes or
no? So it's one of those things that actually growth hormone is a protein, so it actually probably would be pretty quick.
I know, it's a fucking amino acid. I'm trying to.
Yeah. Well, that's just on a kind of a sidebar. People always ask me, yeah, well, what do you think about this IGF-1 stuff that's out there that Ray Lewis was taking under his tongue, or that he was putting on his tongue? And I'm like, Well, regardless if it's IGF-1 or not, I don't think it's doing shit for him.
Right.
What do you IGF-1? I said, yeah, it's IGF-1 is a protein, okay? You put protein into your mouth, it goes down your esophagus into your stomach where it starts getting digested with pepsin and pepsinogen, and then gets into your small intestine where it gets completely chopped up by all your protein enzymes. So, yes, it may enter your mouth as IGF-1, but by the time it gets to your GI tract, it's all the constitutive amino acids. It's not anything. It's nothing. So people say, well, what about all these cows fed growth hormone and stuff? You're not getting any of that. Like, that's not how it works. You have to, that stuff has to be injected to make a difference. And even to that point, there's actually research out there that shows that growth hormone, even though it increases lean body mass, it's actually mostly water and connective tissue, and it doesn't actually seem to increase myofibrillar hypertrophy. Which now, connective tissue may be beneficial for like a powerlifter, especially if you're on anabolic steroids, because, a lot of times what happens is guys get injured because they get so strong so fast because their muscle gets so big relative to their tendon mass. But, sorry, what was I talking about again?
Talk about leucine a little bit. What are two like top supplements that you'd recommend taking? Probably not counting whey, because not really a supplement in my opinion. What are two scams? Speaking of antler spray, and what are like one of the next big things in the supplement market you see coming, or that might affect people's performance?
Good question. So, in terms of like two supplements I really like, obviously creatine monohydrate's up there. It works. For most people it works. For like 70 to 80% of people who are normal responders to creatine, it works. Now you're not talking about 10 pounds of muscle mass and 100 pounds on your total, but you can be talking about significant 5-10 pound improvements in your lifts, that sort of thing, and a little bit more lean body mass. So, it's very inexpensive. You can buy, I think you can probably buy like a kilo of creatine monohydrate for like under $30. At least I think so.
Kilos?
He's rolling in kilos.
That's what Rick Ross is always rapping about.
I've been found out. Set me up. So, but it's very inexpensive and it's very effective. And then branched amino acids. I do like branched amino acids. I think they have some benefits to them, and not just in terms of strength and muscle, but in terms of a body composition overall. As far as two scams, I don't want to name companies specifically because I don't relish the idea of getting legal documents in the mail because people get butthurt over this sort of stuff. But I think silk amino acids is one of them. I did a video log on this kind of and kind of there was a research study that came out where that some of these companies selling this stuff are using, and they said, look, increased testosterone and increased exercise performance. Well, if you look at the study, they gave silk amino acids and then had rats swim, which is a valid test. That's a very valid test. But their placebo was water. So these animals were either getting nothing before they swam, or they were getting some nutrients. So who do you think swam better, right? And then they said, well, it increases testosterone. Well, all groups increased testosterone. It was the exercise that increased the testosterone, not the supplement. So, in my opinion, and actually if you look at silk amino acids, it's the worst possible amino acid profile. The branched amino acid content is extremely low. It's like 1% leucine. It's extraordinarily low. It's like one of the worst amino acid profiles you could have. Then as far as another one, let's see. There's so many to pick from.
What about pro hormones? You get a lot of kids out there that get excited, and they think these pro hormones are going to kind of be the answer and help them, to play football better or whatever. These things have any, are they worth anything at all?
Honestly, I have never really looked into that much. When I first got into natural bodybuilding, they were legal. And I had kind of made a decision that I wasn't going to use them because I kind of looked at it from the perspective that, I'm sorry, not that they were legal. They were still allowed, but there was talk about banning them. And I kind of could see on the horizon that they were going to be banned. So I just figured, you know what, I'm not going to mess with them. it doesn't make sense for me. And I kind of looked at it as like, well, you're taking it for the same reason you would take steroids. And at least from what I've heard from people who are experts in this, because I'm certainly not, they actually have kind of like more severe side effects in a lot of cases than the actual anabolic steroids in terms of side effect for what you're getting back, you know?
Right.
So it's definitely not something I recommend to people. I don't know if I would call it a scam, because I would say some of them do probably produce increases in lean body mass and increased strength, but it's like what cost? You know what I mean? And the other thing is, once you go off of it, you're going to lose quite a bit of that, if not all of it. And especially for kids, you know, I think it's just that kids are so impatient, and so certainly I was when I was in high school, in terms of gaining muscle mass, that they make some bad decisions, you know, and think a supplement's going to help solve everything for them. So, you know, it's definitely nothing I recommend, but I would probably stop short of calling them a scam.
Anything new on the horizon in terms of, you know, either even supplements or any studies you've read recently on, you know, anything that to help burn body fat or gain muscle or just anything along those lines?
Well, I think that one of the things that's coming out now, it's not going to blow people's socks off, because they've probably been hearing a little bit about it, but the research seems to be very positive, is betaine. There seems to be some good research out there to show it improves power output, strength, and possibly body composition. So I think that may be, you know, that's going to be being seen in more products, and rightly so, because it seems to have some solid data backing it up.
What do you feel about all the research that's come out lately about intestinal flora and differences in intestinal flora? Do you think that what they're seeing is really a product of people's diets going into the study, or is it reflective of actual differences in the way people process nutrients?
Well, I will have to be honest and say up front, I haven't looked at a lot of this research. But I will say that I think the intestinal flora aspect of metabolism is extremely interesting. And I think, you know, there's certain ways that you can control for those sorts of variables. You know, if you look at somebody, you have to look at, you know, kind of all your groups of people that you're studying and look at their kind of breakdown ahead of time and try to group people in terms of those who have similar gut floras before you do any kind of intervention or treatment. You know, obviously if you have 12 people and they all have vastly different gut flora when you start, it becomes difficult to draw conclusions from interventions because they were all so different when they began. So I think I think, you know, there can be good studies done as long as they're set up properly. I think a lot of bad research we have out there is either not from the bad research, it's from misinterpretation of the research, people overreaching it, or improperly designed. You know, I think one of my strengths as a researcher was I failed so much at the beginning in terms of research design that I actually became really, really good at it because I made so many mistakes. You know, I made tons of mistakes. But it was good for me because I had to learn everything not to do. And then by the time I was done, I became so anal with my research that I would just stop by in lab just to check on things, even when I didn't have to, just to make sure things were going okay. I mean, I would come in at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning just to make sure, like if I had analysis running, just to make sure it was going well, machines were functioning well. I'd stop in, I would just check in on the animals, just to see how they were doing, just to see if they were okay, you know, like all kinds of stuff. I would, you know, when I was doing.
So you're saying is sometimes anal can be a good thing?
Exactly. Yes.
Going back to the,
I'm sure that quote's going to go up on Twitter.
Yeah, there you go. That's all anybody's going to get from this.
Yeah, exactly. Anal can be a good thing. Dr. Layne Norton. Fantastic.
Going back to the...
I thought he was a PhD, not a proctologist.
The subject of PEDs. What are the Buccaneers doing feeding their quarterback Adderall?
Oh, man, we've been a mess this year. I feel back when the season started. I honestly thought that we'd have a shot to make the playoffs because, our skill positions were all good, save quarterback, which had been up and down. But we had a good defense. We had good run defense, and our Achilles heel on defense had been our pass defense, which we acquired Rivas, and with the new safety we had, I figured, we'd really, and our defense has done well, but man, our offense has just been awful. And
they got all the talent and just they can't put
it
together.
They do. And I said at the beginning of the year, I said we will go as our quarterback goes, and he has gone not
Minnesota.
Well. Yeah, exactly. And I think Minnesota thinks that they're going to get an upgrade, and I'm not really sure they are. I mean, I saw some games Ponder played, and I was looking at it like, well, I think maybe because he doesn't exactly have great. I mean, other than Adrian Peterson, it's not like he has a bunch of stud wide receivers.
Yeah, I think they're injured too. All their wide receivers.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, but yeah, it's kind of been a mess down here. Sports talk radio. It's fun to listen to because you got a bunch of drama going on that you can, that they're ready to talk about. But I guess what it was is I think he took Ritalin or something like that, which I guess Adderall is the one that's approved by the NFL, but Ritalin is not.
Yeah, I think that's true. And they're also supposed to be like confidential information. Even the coach, I think, is supposed to not know about his prescriptions or something like that. Yeah,
exactly. That's kind of what got everybody up in arms, like who the hell's leaking this information?
Right.
Yeah, pretty bad.
But yeah, that's kind of, if I think both sides handled that pretty poorly, to be honest with you. Like, they could have just told the guy to, catch you later, we'll send you packing, because it did seem like he had some disciplinary problems and was kind of just one of those guys who was, not putting in the extra work, but
not progressing like people thought.
Fortunately, I've lived in two different places, so I have two different teams. So my other team is the Colts, who have been killing it lately. So
there you go.
Yeah, you're doing all right.
I'm pretty happy about that. It was a couple years ago when the Bucks and Colts were terrible. That was tough to watch.
Do you have an opportunity to work with many athletes, or are you pretty much just working with people in posing trunks?
I have worked with a few athletes, particularly a couple MMA guys. I worked with a little bit with, I don't know if you guys remember, I forget which season Ultimate Fighter it was, but Chuck O'Neal, I worked with him for a little while. And, kind of on helping him cut weight and do it in a healthy way and have better energy in his fights and that sort of thing. And I've gotten some inquiries from a couple of NFL guys and rugby guys and that sort of thing, but I think people are a little bit afraid to pull the trigger. I understand why, because I haven't have a proven track record with athletes. Obviously I'm pretty confident that I could, but, people kind of tend to go with especially the NFL, I think tends to be a little bit of the good old boy network in terms of like who they hire for strength coaches and I actually interviewed back in the day for the Illinois, when I was at University of Illinois, they opened a position for kind of a head nutritionist for their football program. And so I thought, man, that'd be fun, right? So I went in to interview for it, and they were looking at my credentials, and I was explaining things and what I would want to do. And at the end of it, the guy was kind of like, so it was the head strength coach, who I wasn't super impressed with, to be honest with you. And he kind of said, well, so you wouldn't be cooking the meals for them then, is that what you're saying? And I'm like, no. I think you want a chef, not a nutritionist, So it was kind of, and you see some of the stuff. I'm sure you see this, Mark, a lot. The guy, like some of the programs they're doing and some of the strength stuff they're doing.
Yeah, we get the same thing over here. There's a lot of great athletes in the area, and they're a little nervous about coming into super training because they think it's just powerlifting and it's just about getting big and fat and so on.
But I think the best strength coaches are power lifters that know what they're doing, and any nutritionist that has a clue is going to improve any athlete's performance.
Oh, sure, absolutely. And I think you're starting to see things start to swing that way. You know what I mean? Like back 20 years ago, they would just say, well, don't even lift. Like you don't want to get muscle bound. And now we've come a really long way from that. And they would just kind of eat whatever. But, we've come a really long way from that. And now I think people are recognizing the importance of nutrition. Now it's just the process of trying to filter out the bad information from the good.
Don't you kind of feel that whether you're training for performance, body fat composition, or even getting bigger, if you're training to lose weight, get bigger, or performance, that they're all basically the same thing. You're just making a few modifications to one macronutrient or the other.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that improved performance is going to be optimized by being stronger, more powerful, better endurance. Now, obviously, like if you're talking about a football player, you got to be more well-rounded than you do a powerlifter. You know what I mean? You got to be able to be strong, you got to be able to be powerful, and have endurance. Whereas a powerlifter, we just need to go move some heavy shit. You know what I mean? One of those things is the principles are all pretty similar. You want to optimize nutrient intakes to optimize body composition. I always tell people, like, look, I can't think of very many athletes who can't do better with a little bit more muscle and a little bit less body fat.
How do you feel about some of these, low carbohydrate diets that are out there? I had a lot of success doing carb night. You got diets like carb night and carb backloading, and I'm actually friends with Kiefer and so on and so forth. But regardless of that, I mean, just kind of what are your thoughts on it? I personally didn't have any success with carb backloading, and I don't really know. In my immediate circle, I'm sure there are people that had success with it. In my immediate circle, I don't know anybody who's had success following that diet, especially when they kind of veered off and ate junk, which was kind of prescribed. So how do you feel about those two types of diets?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the basis for the carbs at night, like eating more carbs at night, was based off of one research paper out there. And I've kind of given I don't think there's anything wrong with eating carbs at night, as opposed to any other time of the day. I think that's perfectly fine. I also don't think there's a whole lot that's magical about it. The research paper out there, they basically either had people eat carbs throughout the day or had 70% of their carbs after 6 p.m. And they showed that people who had them after 6 p.m. lost more body fat. Well. Right. I don't think the time of day necessarily – this is my opinion. I don't think the time of day necessarily had anything to do with that. I think it was more so the fact that they were restricting their carbohydrate intake to one time of the day, so they're getting less total overall insulin throughout the day.
I see.
They're staying more post-absorptive throughout the day, and so they're kind of turning on those triggers for fat loss. I think if you would have let's say only had their carbs between 8 a.m. and 12 or noon, I think you would have seen similar things. It would just been reversed in terms of the timing. I think it was more about the prolonged fasting, not prolonged fasting, but prolonged carb restriction. Right. Now that's my opinion. I could be wrong, but based on what I've seen about nutrition data, that would be my best guess.
Also, if you were to sneak in a little bit of junk, a little bit of ice cream, I know we all love to have sweets here and there. If you were to sneak those kinds of things in, do you think that would be the appropriate window? Would be after a training session or something like that?
Well, I think I'm a big proponent of flexible dieting. I think that if you have a target macronutrient intake and you can hit that and you can have a little bit of junk in there, that's fine, especially if it helps keep you consistent. What I typically see with a lot of people is they'll be 100% on their quote unquote clean foods throughout the week, and on the weekend they'll go and binge. You know what I mean?
What do you feel is consistent? Do you feel like an 80-20 is okay? If you're not trying to get ready for a photo shoot or something like that.
It just depends. I mean, I ate ice cream when I was dieting down for bodybuilding shows, getting to shredded levels. Now, right. I tell people look, you're not going to be able to eat all junk if you're wanting to get super lean, because junk is not going to fit into your macros. You know what I mean? You're not going to be able to hit body composition friendly macros. Eating a bunch of garbage. Now, can you eat a little bit here and there? Sure, absolutely. And if that helps keep you sane, I think it's totally appropriate.
Yeah, as long as it helps keep moving you forward.
Yeah.
Anyway,
hey guys, can I go real quick? My wife left and my newborn son is going nuts for a second.
Yeah, no, we hear him in the background. Real quickly, we're just going to end the interview. So real quickly, where can people reach you out?
Sure. My best way to reach me is through my website at www.biolayne.com. I'm also on Twitter at BioLayne. My Facebook fan page is facebook.com/Layne Norton, and my YouTube is BioLayne.
It was awesome having you on the podcast, and go take care of that little one.
Yeah, I will. Thanks you guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Layne.
Catch you later.
See ya.
That kid was going bonkers. I loved it. That kid needed his leucine, I think.
BCAAs in a bottle.
Oh, my God. That was great. That was interesting having him on the show. I thought he had a lot of great input. And as far as I can tell, he's not the prick that some people out there are making him out to be.
I know. He's not an arrogant wanker.
No, he doesn't seem arrogant at all. He
seems very likable guy.
Seems intelligent.
Well, just the fact that I forgot what the question was, and he says, well, I'm not an expert here. I'll give you my opinion. That just shows that you're not arrogant. If he was arrogant, he'd blabber on.
He kept going back to his opinion. He'd say, in my opinion, which is different than saying, this is the fucking way it goes. You know, this is the only way to do this. And, he only touched upon flexible dieting, but next time we have him on, we'll have to hit that up a little bit more, because that's an interesting concept. He's kind of saying some people are kind of, on their path 100%, and then they break that. But when they break it 100% too. Yeah. So his variation of that is just to have a flexible diet that allows you to throw in a little bit of bread or throw in a little bit of cereal or ice cream here and there, as long as you're kind of hitting the target macronutrients that you laid out for yourself for whatever your goals are.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the people that are against flexible dieting see people like Layne or bodybuilders that are shredded, and they post pictures of their flexible foods, but they don't post pictures of their brown rice and chicken. He still eats brown rice and chicken and white rice or chicken or whatever, but then he fits in some ice cream into his diet when he can.
Well, if you think about when you want to relax and have somewhat unhealthy foods, a lot of times it's not by yourself. It's not like you're. Right. It's not like if you're an alcoholic, you're sitting in a corner crying, drinking a bottle or whatever. But
you're eating socially like you would drink socially.
Exactly. You're doing something socially, and I think that a flexible diet would definitely allow for that, because I think it's very common for people to have something pop up, unless you're a total loser like myself, about once a week. Something will pop up once a week. You go to a movie or go on a date or whatever the hell it might be, and you want to just kind of throw back some dessert rather than being all crazy about your diet. You can allow for that. You plan for that.
Why would you want to go to a restaurant that was known for its food and eat like dried chicken and rice? Right?
Yeah, eat a bunch of bullshit. We had one more topic to get to today, and that was giant fat asses. It's become a favorite of ours. Actually, kind of taken over dildos.
I think more jobs need regulation, health regulation, to be exact. Mark and I and Jim all flew on the same flight to the Olympia a couple of weeks back. I don't know what seat Jim had, but I know me and Mark both had an aisle seat.
We're not talking about a Kardashian ass either.
No. That would be great if my stewardess looked like Kardashian.
Getting rubbed by that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. But it's only an hour flight, middle of the day, nap time.
Two big asses going up and down an aisle.
They just smashed your shoulder every time. I think one hit my face, and it woke me up from my nap. And I don't know how those hips didn't lie. Yeah, they just smashed me.
We're talking flight attendants here. These were not just people, making their way to the restroom. This is back and forth.
Yeah, and can't they just? When they sign up for the job, what if they weighed 800 pounds? What if they weighed 800? Wouldn't they say something at that point?
Well, they'd probably make the plane crash if they weighed 800
what's pounds. What's the limit? These women were pretty big. Not like they weighed anything near that, but their freaking asses and thighs were bigger than most defensive tackles in football.
Somebody told me, I forgot who I was talking to about that.
That bitch could play for the Cowboys.
They told me that there is a weight regulation that they have to go through something. I was like, I don't believe it. There were two.
Hey, how about you put them through a fucking hula hoop?
Well, what I thought,
if they can fit through that, then they might be able to fit down the goddamn aisle. But
they get like a hip circle and
having
just
a rhinoceros run down the aisle.
If they side shuffle down that thing, they're trying to walk square down this 2-inch aisle. Even I would hit somebody, and I'm quite slim.
And I know people out there are probably thinking, "Oh, you're being so mean," but seriously, just stop being so fucking fat.
Yeah, she's eating too many pretzels and peanuts in the back. She's stealing our pretzels and peanuts.
It's not that hard. It may be hard to be really lean. It may be hard for someone to get a six-pack. It might be hard to bench 500 pounds and so on and so forth. But it ain't that hard to not let yourself get so big and fat that you can't fit down the fucking aisle in a airplane.
Yeah, we're not asking for somebody to be jacked and tan here. We're just asking for them to make it down the aisle without smacking. It's bad enough on the flights where there's a cart and they're pushing the cart and they're smacking you with that. That's understandable.
Yeah,
but these asses were way bigger than the cart. Yeah. They were the same size as the cart sideways.
Yeah.
Whoa. If you can envision that.
Yeah. Whoa. It's pretty rough.
And that shit was waking me up. We have another ass story to share with you today.
Well, in our training program, we have slowly added and started to implement the Zercher squat with a Zercher harness. And I don't know if you, my Silent Mike fans of the world, are familiar with the movie Semi-Pro, but they talk about the jejunum. and I believe it's a spot in your abdomen somewhere. I wish the doctor was here to talk about this, because he'd probably tell me exactly where the jejunum was.
There's certain movements you do in the gym that, just for lack of a better term, tend to really blow you out. They tend to blow out the old sphincter. I did a lift at the original Super Training a couple years ago that was next to the Hmong funeral home. They sacrificed many animals outside that place. But I got done with a lift. I can't remember what it was. I think it was just a heavy squat, really. And I told everybody, I'm like, damn, I think I blew out my ass. And everybody started laughing. I'm like, no, I think I blew out my ass, like my asshole. Something happened down there. And then things were too problematic to even show up to the next training session. And everybody's like, well, where the hell did he go?
Just retired.
And then when I came back, another day or two later, they were like, well, where were you? I was like, I told you guys, I blew my ass out,
Well, what's missing from this story is the text message that I got.
Yeah.
That said, I think I blew my O-ring.
Yeah,
Like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, I blew an O-ring. How do I help? How do I get some help here?
Well, we did like a set of 6 with the Zerchers yesterday, and I don't know if Guinness World Records was around, but I think Mark let out a fart for the whole set. The entire set.
Yeah, it was a set of like 10, so however long that takes.
Maybe a 30-second fart.
Maybe, however long that takes to complete.
Think of a subwoofer.
Yeah, a busted subwoofer. It was half broken.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, that thing causes some major problems. So if you're excited about what we're talking about, then you should purchase a Zercher harness.
You can too.
Oh my God, that thing is terrible. It's worse than Starbucks.
No way.
Well, I think it is.
Your jejunum is your midgut, by the way.
Midgut. There you go.
Well, the Zercher harness has like a pad on it that pushes into your stomach somehow.
Exactly.
At the very top, but your bunghole, because we were doing them off the rack and we were doing good mornings with them, and so your bunghole's kind of opened up in the beginning, and then as you're coming up, you're trying to close it off to squeeze your butt cheeks real hard, but then that thing pushes on you, which I think opens everything back up again.
It's very like a tug of war going on.
Yeah, your butthole is very confused on exactly
days
expand, contract. It's not good. I don't know if the Zercher harness perhaps should come with a butt plug.
Yeah. Or it could be replace your fiber supplements, maybe.
Maybe made out of some sort of slingshot material.
Well, there's a yoga move that you do that, like if you have a lot of gas, you do this thing where it's supposed to blow all the gas out.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I remember doing that to my son when he was a baby, sticking his feet up, pushing his feet up like towards his chin, and he'd just go. That was amazing. But nothing works quite like that Zercher harness. So if you're gassy and stuff's locked up, hop on one of those things. It'll clear you right out. That's our medical advice for today. And that's it from Mark Bell's PowerCast.
Follow us on Twitter at STGymSac. Follow us on Facebook /SuperTrainingGym. Subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher, or check us out on ShoutEngine.com, which is our podcast host. Also, home of The Smoking Tire. The producer of The Smoking Tire owns Shout Engine and has been incredibly helpful. His name is Chris Hayes. So shout out to him. And thanks. That's number 6.
Later.
Subscribe to Power Magazine at thepowermagazine.com. If you choose the digital edition, you can catch up on all the great back issues, take your training to the next level with Slingshot products at howmuchyoubench.net, and look for BSN products including NO Explode at bodybuilding.com. Mark Bell's PowerCast is a production of supertraining.tv.